Hey, welcome everybody. This is John Paul Mendoza with It's a Paul World, and I have a very special guest today, all the way from Big Sky Country in Montana, and that is John Baden. John, welcome to It's a Paul World. I'm glad you're able to spend some time with us. And I understand that you've got a couple things you want to say. Why don't you do a quick introduction, and then I've got a curiosity that you're going to have to answer for us.
Oh, I'd be happy to do that because I'm a happy and quite enthused guy. Let me tell you how I discovered the Last Green Valley. I don't know if you've heard of that book, but I think it's worth reading.
Okay.
It's a description of finding the Gallatin Valley, but I'll tell you how I found the Gallatin Valley. My background is come from an ag family with a bit of forestry, and I developed somehow an odd interest in economic anthropology when I was an undergraduate. And there were very few schools that had programs in economic anthropology, Yale, Northwestern, and Indiana University. And I called IU and had the immense good fortune of landing an interdisciplinary doctoral fellowship in economic anthropology. And so I went to IU, which was it's Bloomington, Indiana. And if you have to live in the Midwest, that's a great place to be.
Okay.
And I thoroughly enjoyed my time at IU and went to a couple other graduate schools on short programs while enrolled at IU. And one of those programs was at Pitt, which at that time had quite the active anthropology program and was one of the homes of the Human Relations Area Files, which was a collection of ethnographies. So I lucked into as a graduate student, I lucked into a faculty fellowship, NSF fellowship, to spend a summer there, which I did. And while there, I discovered a Christian communist commune, a whole set of them, called the Hooterites.
The Hooterites, okay.
Hooterites, named after Jacob Hooter.
Okay.
And in approximately 1528, God came and spoke to Jacob Hooter and encouraged Jacob to go read verses 5 through 7 of the book of Acts, which apparently told people to live God's way, they should live communally. So Jacob set about doing that, and a long story, but ultimately they ended up in 1847 going to South Dakota, which happens to be where FreedomFest is going to be.
Okay.
What an odd conjunction is that, eh?
So you're saying that we're in the footsteps of Hooterism. So, okay.
Well, yeah, actually, yeah.
And this has, and by the way, this has nothing to do with Hooters, the chain of restaurants, right? It has nothing to do with that kind of Hooters.
I don't think it does. And
okay. All right.
If you've ever been on a Hooterite colony, you'll understand why.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay. So regardless, so I met a noted anthropologist, and he knew my interest in economic anthropology. And he said, there's this Christian commune sect called the Hooterites, and they are Anabaptists like the Amish and the Mennonites, but the Hooterites are Christian communists. They live in communes. And they're successful. And people have studied their genetics. They go back 400 years. And they have very good records. And they have no particular ammonalities. They have nothing, they don't have like 2 left feet or anything like that. They have a very, very unusual and small group of albinos, but very trivially small. But people studied their religion and their history and so forth. No one's ever done their economics. And since you're in economic anthropology and you're looking for a dissertation topic, this might be it. So I convinced my faculty, my graduate committee back at IU that I should do this. And it took a little convincing, but they finally said, if you could get money to do that, have at it. And so I wrote it was actually a term paper that was a proposal that ended up going to the Ford Foundation. And the Ford Foundation had a significant positive interest in socialism and advancing it and showing at least that it might be a viable system. And so my proposal I wrote the proposal to basically suggest there was a way that it would be useful for me to study the success of a socialist society. And I got an immense amount of funding for it. And I figured out in contemporary money what it would have been, but it was just north of $70,000. That's a whole lot of money. That was a lot. It's $17,800, but if you convert that to today's money, it's about 70,000, a little over 70,000.
Sure. Yeah.
I had $70,000 to study a group that I selected in part because I knew where I wanted to live, sort of. And that was somewhere east of the Rocky Mountains, in ag country that also had forestry. And there weren't all that many schools out here. And so I ended up lucking into a job at Montana State University. And while I was looking for a university, I was also looking for some farm or ag land to buy. And so I found a job at Montana State University in a ranch that was looking for a home, namely someone to pay for it. And so I lucked into a ranch where we are now. And in fact, if you want to look, if you're on your computer, take a look at badenbadenranch.com and you'll see pictures of it. You see more than pictures. There's a video of it. Very, very recent video. So at any rate, I ended up here after visiting and living on some 22 or 24 Hooterite colonies, and very much enjoyed doing that. So I had a wonderful time visiting this part of the country.
Right.
And decided where I wanted to live, and ended up lucking into a job at Montana State, finding a ranch, finding someone to loan me money to buy the ranch, and have lived here. I've been other places, but this has been home base for a very long time. And my wife and I together, I think, represent something north of 8 generations in American agriculture. And so we had a good ag background. And so we have a successful ranch that's in a beautiful, beautiful place. And we are 25 minutes from an airport with direct flights to 24 cities. We're 10 miles from Bozeman, which is one of the finest places you could be, but it's full. So I don't encourage anyone to come here.
I was waiting for you to just start, putting up an 800 number so people can start buying Baden acres. Well, I mean, your home site is coming up now. I can almost feel it. Are you serious? No. I mean, I'm just the way you were leading up. I mean, you're just
you pulled it up.
No. I'm saying you, when you start talking like this, I mean, you almost sound like you're doing the pitch. I mean,
don't worry.
Come on down.
It can't be developed. We paid a fair amount of money to put it in a conservation easement.
Oh, okay, good for you.
Yeah. So and also I had this wonderful experience of finding this place that was wrecked. I mean, it had been in an estate, several estates for a long time, and so it was operated by basically renters. Had relatively short-term time on it. So of course, how much could they extract in their 2 or 5 years of their leases? And so it was inexpensive when I found it, and I've been able to restore it since. And one of the joys was restoring a spring creek that had been destroyed roughly 1900, or you could never find out quite when. But it now has a very, very happy, thriving. I don't know if they're happy, but I think they're happy trout.
Happy trout. Well,
happy trout.
I'm glad. I'm feeling better already because we have happy trout. That's
We
great.
have happy trout. We also have happy geese, and we have lots of deer, and we have herds of elk, but that's only occasionally.
So, how in the world did you get from where you are now, this idyllic place, and saying, "Okay, I've got to go to a place like Freedom Fest," and talk to me about how you got hooked up with the whole Freedom Fest situation?
I, well, I am a classical liberal at the corpuscular level.
Okay.
I was born that way.
All right.
And I'm not an uppercase L libertarian, but I'm a lowercase L libertarian, classical liberal. And I don't have any control over that. That's just the way I'm wired. And some have said I'm an anarchist, which is definitely not true because I strongly believe in the importance of the rule of law.
Right.
In fact, for 25 years, I think it was, we ran programs for Article 3 federal judges. There are roughly 860 to 900 Article 3s. And our 25-year program, we had a total of 529 federal judge visits to almost entirely to Bozeman or Big Sky.
Mm.
So obviously, I believe in the rule of law. That's for sure.
Okay. So, all right, but that doesn't answer the question. So, how did you open that door and step through it to get into the whole Freedom Fest thing? Now, is this your first Freedom Fest, or how many have you been to before?
I think I've been at least one, perhaps two, but it's been some years.
Okay.
I've just attended a lot of libertarian and conservative meetings for decades and decades. I mean, I'm just sort of in that loop, I guess. In fact, you know about the Mount Peleron Society, I assume.
I do not.
Oh, sorry. Oh, surely you recognize the name of Friedrich Hayek.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Well, Hayek founded in Mount Peleron, France, in 1947. Milton Friedman was a very young Milton Friedman at that time, and he was at the first meeting. And of the 27 members of that meeting, I believe at least 5 of them received Nobel Prizes later.
Ah.
And the Mount Peleron Society has had a meeting every year, I think, since then. And at any rate, we've hosted 2 of them.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and so, I've been sort of in the movement for a long time. And that's how I became involved with Freedom Fest.
So what are you going to be talking about at Freedom Fest this year? What's got you up and going, and the burr in the saddle to get you riding that way?
Okay. I am interested in the factors that conjoin to foster the conjunction. Now, this is, sorry for all these abstractions, the conjunction of liberty,
okay,
environmental quality, and prosperity. Okay, so liberty, right, ecology, and prosperity. That is my operating trinity: liberty, okay, ecology, prosperity. And so I've been trying to advance that for my entire adult life, that conjunction. I've only put it together in that trinity for, I don't know, probably 10 or 15 years. But I just think that's the way I'm trying to organize my life. And that's why my wife and I happen to live in this ranch in the most remote of the contiguous 48 states. And we both taught at Montana State, she for 29 years. I was run out of it a long time ago, 1985. But that's expected and predicted.
Right.
Milton predicted I would be run out of Montana State, by the way.
Because of your libertarian views?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't go over well in a bureaucracy, in any bureaucracy, certainly not State University. It'd probably be even worse now because, among other things, I'm not exactly politically correct, or certainly an anti-wokist, I suppose. But see, it's nice to be old and at least moderately well off and live in a ranch and be well armed and be bulletproof. I can do or say, whatever I want.
So what do you think is the challenge? Because obviously you call it a trinity. Again, my background, I call it a trifecta because of course I gambled professionally for 4 years, so I call it a trifecta. So you've got liberty, you've got ecology, and you have prosperity.
Yes.
And it appears from our current situation that those are at odds. That we have the Green New Deal. We have lots of discussion about how we have to change all of the things that we're doing, and in fact shut down society to a certain extent. Of course, I don't see anybody giving up their private planes, but we have a lot of nannyism. So talk about how those three fit together, because it appears that those seem to be at odds, and in your mind they're not at odds. In your mind, there's a blending that can come together.
Not only is there a blending, they complement one another. So let's start with liberty.
Okay.
Liberty, among other, I mean, there are lots of ways to talk about liberty, but I like to think of liberty as the opportunity to exercise one's vision. And that vision can be constrained by lots of things. It could be constrained by religious prohibitions on certain things. It could be constrained, of course, by the government. It can be constrained by a culture like woke culture today. Lots of other things. But if you live on a ranch, you have an immense amount of liberty to exercise your vision.
Right.
And we have, for example, I've restored the Spring Creek and then developed 5 very productive trout ponds that have raised self-generate 3 species of trout. And so people come and look at it, wow, this is really neat. It must have been hard to get the permits to do all this. And I said, well, it probably would be. I don't know. I never, we have water rights that go back to 1866. We have springs on the ranch.
Right.
We have 2 streams. We have a canal privately built from 1883 through 85, comes out of the Gallatin River at milepost 77, just north of Yellowstone Park boundary. And that canal was developed privately. We have more than a mile of it going through our ranch. And that refreshes the groundwater as well as giving us irrigation. And it's a nice self-sustaining system. Now, there are trout in there. How did they get there? Legally, maybe not quite in conformity with all the rules and regulations, but I did in fact go to the state Fish and Game and make sure that we were certified to have these trout,
right,
not illegally. So we obey the regs to that degree, but how they wandered in is another story. But sometimes the Wortman Creek overflows and gets into and gets into our creek, and they get into the pond, and that's, I guess, what happened. Probably makes sense.
Trout find a way to get there. Got it.
That's right.
So, all right. So you have liberty, and you've experienced liberty because obviously you have a lower regulatory environment than we have in other ways. So how does the ecology complement liberty, and then so give us that second piece.
Well, okay. So I had the liberty. I had the liberty to generate enough funds for a variety of ways to buy the property, and the liberty to restore it according to my vision. We didn't go to any state agencies or federal agencies to get permission to do anything. We didn't violate anything that I know of, or that anyone discovered. And so, no, seriously. I mean,
I appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, all of that worked. And let's see. Okay. How prosperity and ecology go together. You see, you could think of ranching or farming as either let me say ranching and farming. I'm going to use the ranching part of farming because we do both. You can either farm for money or farm with money. And there's a huge difference. If you're ranching for money, your orientation, of course, is toward the money.
Right.
If you're ranching with money, you're engaged in sort of an artistic and ecological process,
right,
that you enjoy. And it has a philosophic and indeed a spiritual component. And so we have the luxury to conduct experiments. Like, for example, when we built when we restored the Spring Creek and built the ponds, my model was, what if we had on that creek beaver, which we have, and sometimes we don't have, they come and go. But the beaver would come and they'd build a dam on the creek. And the dam would build a pond. And the pond fish would end up getting in there one way or another. That just happens. But the beaver, they eat themselves out of house and home. I mean, they eat all the trees around, or they cut down all the trees around the ponds.
right.
And after a while, the trees are too far away for them to have a source for their beaver dams and for their the beaver mounds. And so then they move downstream or upstream. But when they move, they don't take their dams with them.
Right.
Of course, they're there. They're semi-permanent structures. I mean, they're for decades at least, some for hundreds of years. And so they built another dam. And so when I was designing our place, I said, well, let's imagine what it would be if the beaver came in and built 3 dams, and of course we'd have 3 ponds, and of course the stream continues.
Right.
And so that was my model. And I had the good fortune to have the funds to be able to do that. Also, I also love to do this work. And in an earlier life, I was a timber buyer and contract logger and a professor of forestry and so forth. And so I have the equipment, know how to operate the equipment to do this stuff. And it's fun. I mean, it's really, really, boys like to play with toys. And some of us don't ever get over it, but we get ever bigger toys. Well, I'm maxed out on the size of toys I have. I don't need anything bigger than what I have.
Right.
And I have a dump truck that'll haul 52,000 pounds, and that's quite enough. I don't have big excavators because big excavators cost, $100,000, $200,000. But I have friends that have excavators, and you move a whole lot of dirt, in a few hours with a big excavator. So I could do all this work, and sometimes I'd trade for it. Sometimes I'd buy it by the hour. And so I ended up with a pretty nice system. Well, you're looking at it, I think.
No, it's excellent. And so you're going to be at FreedomFest, and you're going to be on it looks like on a panel or two. So what are the things that you're bringing to FreedomFest to share? Because this is obviously, you've lived a life that most people would have a hard time imagining what that life looks like. And how do you translate that to other people so they have an appreciation that you have for the land and for the ecology and what is possible?
One of the things I want to do is to show what is possible. I mean, I did not come from a wealthy background. I came from an educated background, and moderately well off, but certainly not rich enough to go buy a ranch. And of course, what I could do back 50 plus years ago could not be done today. Not here. It absolutely positively could not be done today. Land here, which used to be, when I purchased it, it was very slightly above the ag value. In other words, the ag production would pay a big chunk of the cost of retiring the debt, the mortgage on the land. There's no possible way that could be done now. The value has just changed so immensely, and that's a function of a variety of things. One of them is as a society becomes more wealthy, a big chunk of that society, so a significant proportion, develops greater ecological appreciation. With wealth and education, often comes appreciation for environmental and ecological values. And if people have moderate wealth, they can translate their interests into owning land and being able to mold that land and sculpt that land and perpetuate the ecological values, which we did by putting a fairly significant amount of money into this conservation easement to sustain it when we're long gone.
Excellent. All right. So you're going to be at FreedomFest July 21st through the 24th. And do you know, and you're going to be talking about these kinds of issues and the values that you're now bringing forth, and then hoping to get more people to recognize the necessity of not seeing it at diametrically opposed, for prosperity cannot exist with the ecology and vice versa, right?
Well, see, and another thing I'm trying to do, and now I don't know what the audience at Freedom Fest will be, but I assume it will be a substantial proportion of conservatives and libertarians. And such people, in my 50 years of experience with them, tend to view, quote, in greens or environmentalists as the enemy. The reflex is to view them as the enemy. Because many of them are, as a matter of fact. Most of them, most environmentalists, most greens, let me say it the other way, relatively few greens appreciate the importance of property rights and the market process for advancing their goals. I mean, I'm confident that that's true. I don't have the survey data on it, but I'd be absolutely astounded if that were not true for 80% of the greens.
Well, yeah, and my experience with talking to people who are greens is that I will run into them and they always ask me, they look at me, obviously I'm older than they are. They're usually in their mid to late 20s, maybe early 30s, you know, and they are of course sitting there talking about how we have to, you know, end whatever we have today and move on. And I look at them and I always ask them the same question, which is I ask them how many solar panels they have on the roof. And they look at me and they say, well, what do you mean? I said, well, how many solar panels? You know, if you are a true believer, right? If you are a Hoffer true believer, as Hoffer's talked about the true believer, how many do you have on your roof? And this guy looked at me and he, of course, was clever and he said, well, let me turn that around. How many do you have on your roof? And I said 40. And he didn't know what to say. And I said, so how many do you have on your roof? And he goes, well, I'm a renter. I said, well, that's immaterial. If you're here to save the planet, if you're standing on the street telling me what to do, you should start by putting panels on the roof where you habitate. And he says, but I don't own the property. I said, it's irrelevant. Go to your landlord and say, we've gathered our money together. We're not buying some Starbucks and we're not going to go out and drink, Red Bull and vodka. And we're going to start putting panels on roofs because we believe in saving the planet.
Or we'll go rent from the guy who does have panels on his roof. We will discriminate in favor of renting from people who have panels. That's pretty easy.
I said, but there again, you can make that choice today, and you can start putting panels on roofs. And if you do that, and by the way, if you lower the regulations to getting panels on the roof, it took me a long time to do it. I don't live in idyllic Montana. I live in the state of confusion known as California. I said, now listen, if you want to do that, you will in fact convince me that you are serious about solving this problem. However, if you are not willing to sacrifice your money for the greater good that you want us all to sacrifice, you have no true interest in doing it. All you really want to do is have something to do for an afternoon and stand on a street corner and tell me about why we need to do something, because I've already done it. So that's my answer to people when they ask that to me. And again, I did it purely for economic reasons. In fact, most of the barrier to getting, especially in California where they overcharge for electricity, is that frankly the motivation to do this was purely economic. I did a calculation for the net present value, looked at my return on investment, and panels go up. It's that simple.
How long would it take you to return your investment?
Well, okay, there's several ways to look at this. So the first thing you have to look at is that because I have offices in my house and things like that, and electricity, because you need air conditioning, is that I hit a peak of about $1,100 a month for electricity. So it costs me
a year,
a month, $1,100 a month. So what I did was, and by the way, the when you go and try to figure out how to do this, I ended up being my own general contractor. So here are the numbers. I spent $72,000, and I went to the government, who was giving out money, because again, though I oppose big government, I will exploit the stupidity of my brethren in California. So they were giving out money at lower rates, and I ended up getting this loan. Now, here's the beauty of it, John, is that this money allowed me to take a post-tax money and move it to pre-tax money, because essentially I could deduct the interest off of it. I also then got 30-year financing on this, and I eliminated my electrical cost. And actually, I end up with a little bit of a rebate at the end of the year. So when you actually look at it, probably in 5 years, I got all my money back. But actually, it's better than that, because of this one important factor, which is when I go to sell the house, I am going to get a normal appraisal, and then I'm going to actually do a model showing how much money the house generates by its excess electrical capacity, and show that this house generates cash every month. and that way I will get that back. And since I've been able to use the zero interest rate environment, I've done just what the hedge fund guys know how to do, which is have the government subsidize me. Oh, by the way, I got a 30% federal tax credit. Thank you, John, for helping me with that. I really appreciate it. Just want to thank every taxpayer. And then the state of California gave me a bunch of money, and all of that netted out to so if you take all that into account, it really comes out to, if you want to squeak it a little bit, 2.5 years, and I'm on house money.
Wow.
But what you have to do, though, and this is what people don't do, is that what they don't do is they don't put enough panels on their roof, and therefore understand, because see, the bureaucracy wants you to right size it, and you're an economist, you're a smart guy, and you're an optimizer. I can tell you're an optimizer. So what you want to do is you want to exploit the aperture of the sun for your roof. Now, it helps having a partner in a different business who has a daughter who's going to Caltech, so we could calculate how we could exploit the aperture of the sun and utilize it to get as much power as we possibly can. So in a good spring day, I go net negative on energy at sunrise, about 20 to 30 minutes into sunrise, and I stay there until an hour before the sun sets. I'm in net negative all day. Oh
my God.
So anyway, I know this is your interview, but I just wanted to point out that's my ecology. And here's the insanity of this thing. The way that we can actually alter this world is that while the government was driving down the street and metaphorically throwing bushels of money out, and I look at the houses where I live at, because I live on the side of a hill, so not quite as nice as where you live, but I live on the side of a hill in the end of a private road, and not one single of my neighbors took that free money. It's not free, but it's pretty damn close to being free, and put panels on the roof. It's insanity. And that was to me the most interesting part, is that no one else saw that this thing would pay for itself and generate cash every single day.
How do you account for the sub-optimization of your neighbors? How do you account for them being not as smart as you?
Well, I mean,
I mean,
you
you have
want
an
you want you want
example.
the
I
you want
mean, you don't hide your panels. Everyone can see them.
they sure can.
And you seem like an outgoing guy. So you obviously, I assume you talk to your neighbors.
I proselytized to them. I said to them, they're giving away free money. Oh, and here's the best part about the free money is there was no credit check. You didn't even have to show any income. You just you could just fog the mirror, and they told you this is how much money you can have. I mean, how's that for insanity? Anyway,
You
why didn't my neighbors do it? Well, simply because here's and again, my background is at one time I owned a finance company. So I took this thing. You may have seen this. It's from ancient days, but I use it all the time. It's called a financial calculator, and I could literally show them how they could get a payoff roughly in 4 years if they didn't do much effort at all. But if they added some things, they could get it down to 2.5 years, and they could get a bump on the value of their house as that house moved down the road. Because if the state of California continues to drive up electrical costs, which is what they want to do, what will happen is that means my house, every time they raise the rate, I'm a very happy guy, because there's actually, and it's provided by the US Department of Energy, you can actually calculate the value of the kilowatt hours that I produce, or I'm into megawatts. And I can show you what that each incremental kilowatt is worth as they raise the prices. So I'm sitting here every day saying, please, idiots in Sacramento, raise the price, raise the price, raise the price. John needs a better rate of return.
What is, I have no idea. What is the rate you pay for your electricity? I mean, not, you don't, I mean, sorry, your neighbor.
Well, yeah, for those who have not taken advantage of this. So California has a tiered system, of course, right? It has to be complicated or it wouldn't be a bureaucracy. So you have a small little bucket of energy, which is the cheapest, and somewhere between 18 and 22 cents a kilowatt. And what that does is that is called the core electrical requirement per building, per household. And that allows you to run. And again, I look at you and I can understand, you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about, which is you can run a hot plate and a Philco transistor radio, and that's it, because there ain't enough electricity, and a 60-watt bulb. But that's it, because you will exceed that. And once you exceed it, the rate goes up by about 20%. And then once you exceed that, the rate goes up again. And right now, I believe our top rate is about 42 cents a kilowatt hour. And in Montana, it's probably 8 cents a kilowatt hour.
I don't even know.
Or 12. Yeah, I mean, and you're probably getting a rural rate, so it's even lower. But yeah, no, it's like 40, 50. They want to drive it to 75 cents a kilowatt. That's where they want to go. And I'm just sitting there going, right on.
Is it an accident that I think that more people are leaving California than going into California now?
That's correct. Yeah, more people are leaving California than are staying. Yeah. But understand. So here's why California politicians don't have to change. And that is that California, by virtue of the fact that it is in the coast of the US and is the closest, very large, very big metropolitan area, and it has a lot of vibrancy, means that people from China and Korea and Japan and Malaysia and Singapore and the Philippines and Indonesia, all of those countries, and there are others, I don't want to leave any out, want to bring somebody here. So if you bring somebody here and explain to them that you're going to live in California and you're going to be exploited by the tax code, and they realize that they've just come from a country that the money is funny and none of this really, you don't really have anything at all, they think getting a haircut of 50 or 60% isn't too bad, because they're just okay with it. So that's California's savior. California's savior is inexpensive labor from Latin America and high skilled labor from the Pacific Rim, and that's what keeps this state afloat, in my opinion.
Remar- I have only been to California a very, very few times. I was at UCLA in with the economics department for a short while, and I think I've attended a couple of economic, meetings there, but I have not had any huge attraction for I find it interesting, but I'm not opposed to it.
Well, it comes down to the weather is very interesting, very good, right? So in Southern California, the weather is exceptional. The other thing about California that pulled me here was just the economic factor. I mean, you decided to go from Indiana to South Dakota to Montana. I moved from Colorado because I got into the high tech business, and I realized that my fame and fortune would be made if I moved to California. And it was very true, because by virtue of the fact of being in California, and I worked for a variety of smaller companies, is that when they wanted to open up an outpost, right? This is just like when we sent Lewis and Clark out. But if you have a $5 million company that's in Massachusetts, you need somebody in LA. And just by virtue of being here in LA and not sounding like an LA person, which usually means, not that ambitious, I actually ended up getting lots of great gigs, which, eventually helped me make a bunch of money. And the other interesting thing is that because I saw so much of the, take off early on Friday, start late on Monday, there's so much money, you don't have to work very hard. I worked very hard and therefore got my unfair advantage from other people in the marketplace. And I was rather surprised about it. So that was the attraction. That was in 1983 to the early 90s. The switch came when the fact that California had such a disparity in various capacities, and then the regulations have kicked in that are just insane. I mean, don't even. I mean, I told you the good part. See, I actually, it cost me a bunch of time, because when I needed to get my final permit to turn on my solar system, the city had to approve the final permitting, and it was delayed by 6 weeks. And I raised all kinds of hell, which the contractor said, don't upset them, John. And I went down and they had lost the application. So whenever I run into my politicians who talk about how these are necessary regulations, I said, 6 weeks you cost me, and I can map it out and show you how much you cost me. So where do I go to get that money back? plus the compounding. And of course, they don't like to talk to me because I'm over the top. But again, I'm a, for the way, and I appreciate where you're coming from. The way I view myself is that I'm a libertarian, little L. I'm a capitalist. I'm absolutely a believer in capitalistic system. And I happen to be also a hawk, because I have been around and have seen that and not a hawk in the sense of, let's go in and do some silly war. But if we're going to go, we should be hawks. We should not be doves.
Now, were you in the military?
I was not. No, I was not. I actually took a very different road, but I've worked with the defense world a lot in my life.
One of the things that I did that I'm really, really happy with, in I don't remember. I think roughly the late 80s.
Right?
Excuse me.
No.
For whatever reason, Bozeman has a very, very large number of nonprofits. And in Montana, it's relatively easy to create a nonprofit. So in the late 80s, I came up with the idea of creating a nonprofit to bring wounded, this is when we were seriously engaged in the Middle East and had lots of wounded warriors. I created an organization called Warriors in Quiet Waters. And I got some foundation grants, and I put in a little myself to create a 501c3 called Warriors in Quiet Waters, where we'd bring warriors from military hospitals, and the hospitals selected them. You
Right.
bring in anywhere from 8 to 12 at a time for 5 days of trout fishing for therapy. And initially, the first 3 years, they all learned to fish on our ranch, and then would go to the famous rivers that everyone's heard of in Montana for trout fishing, the Yellowstone, the Madison, the Upper Missouri, and so forth. And that was a foundation that is on, and I haven't been involved with for some years now, but it's extremely successful, has brought literally hundreds of warriors here for therapy.
Right.
So one of the things that's so much fun is to have these entrepreneurial ideas in the nonprofit sector and create organizations that do these good things that are self-sustaining, which that clearly is now.
Well, I'm really pleased to hear that. Now, yeah, to me, and the reason why I tell people, my breakdown is that it's just that, I think that a lot of times, everyone wants to be, a little bit squishy. So they,
I don't know what you mean by squishy.
oh, well, kind of blow with the wind. So if I tell somebody I'm a hawk, and it rubs them the wrong way, I say, well, we can talk about that. I said, and I can tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly of what that means, and what, but I said, I've thought about it a lot, which is how I've kind of come to this. But if I didn't want to, if I wanted to be more accommodating, maybe that's the right way to say it, I would kind of temper that more. And what I do is I explain, listen, here's what I mean by being a hawk. I ended up selling lots of computers to the guys who developed the B-2 bomber. And I had relatives who were in Eastern Europe and got trapped. My father was born on the Polish-Ukrainian border. And I am definitely, I started on the left, but I'm absolutely an anti-communist kind of guy. And I said, look, here's the thing. We had the Soviet Union, and we had a lot of people saying we have to trust the Soviet Union, and we have to figure that out. And I've got one word for you: Chernobyl. That's the word, Chernobyl. And I said it was a corrupt system. We have problems, but it was a corrupt system that to this day they've never admitted how many people died at Chernobyl. Back to the B-2 bomber. I said, I'm now selling equipment to the B-2 bomber that was being developed, and it was need to know, couldn't tell anybody, and I end up getting the story from Caspar Weinberger, who spoke at a conference. And Caspar Weinberger talked about the fact that Ronald Reagan, when he saw the B-2 bomber and said, it's ready, he goes, I want to announce it to the world. Caspar Weinberger and everyone said to Ronald Reagan, do not do that. Do not do that. This is the most expensive thing that we've ever spent money on, ever. We have spent more money on this than nuclear carriers. This is the most expensive thing. And he goes, yeah, but I think it's going to work. And so he did it. He announced it to the world. The KGB said it was a fake. It was a phony. Now the Berlin Wall falls. Everything goes down the drain. And Caspar Weinberger is relaying the story. And he's sitting next to, at a conference, this guy who was in charge of the Russian air defenses. And he tells the story from the other side. And he said, so I get called into the Kremlin to brief them. And he said, is this true? Is this possible? Can they deliver 16 megatons per plane, and we can't see it on radar? Now, what no one in the US knew at the time is that the Soviets had spent the equivalent of $800 billion on radar defense systems to capture and make sure that the Americans couldn't sneak up on them. And the guy said to Cap Weinberger, you negated $800 billion worth of effort in all those years. And it was worthless, because if you had 10 of those planes, that would be devastating. But Ronald Reagan was talking about building 200 of them. There would not be a single Soviet city left, and they would sneak up on us. And he goes, that was part of the linchpin that pulls the pin on what happens to the Soviet Union.
Now,
But to me,
sorry.
I'll take a breath and say it. To me, was that money worth spending? Well, if it actually ended the Cold War, Yes, because it changed what happened and released Europe from this grip of this terrible situation. Does it mean that that Russia is great today? Now we're back to dictatorship, but I'll take dictatorship over the Soviet Union.
Well, I'm just guessing. I assume it's because the plane would fly over 50,000 feet. Is that correct? Why?
No, it's because of the way that the B-2 bomber is designed as a stealth bomber. On radar, it doesn't show up.
Okay.
So you can't see it. So if you take 16 megatons per plane times 200, it's obliteration. Now nobody's going to do that, but it was absolutely a first strike weapon.
What a wonderful story.
Now, I mean, and when I heard that, and I told people, and people were like, well, that's nuts. I said, but you got to understand, it wasn't diplomacy. It was because at Reykjavik, when Reagan is negotiating and gets up and walks out, Gorbachev has nothing. He doesn't have a hole card. He doesn't have aces. He knows that he's vulnerable, and he knows that in ways the game is over. So to me, that's how I define why I'm a hawk. Now, getting involved in all these crazy wars and trying to do society building, that's not what soldiers do. Soldiers defeat enemies. Politicians attempt to build a culture and a society. But that's why. But I thought I would share it with you because you're a guy I think who is interested in interesting stories.
I indeed am. A quick question. I should know the answer. I'm sort of embarrassed to ask.
Okay.
The fellow in the panel behind you, he's smiling out at us in various colors.
Oh, that's Rand Paul. So it's a Paul.
And so why he doesn't remember me, I'm sure, but we've met a few times. But why is he there?
Because so the website is It's a Paul World, and in 2013, my brother and I went from business to say we were interested in trying to get somebody elected who is more electable, and not the big L libertarian candidates. Yeah. And so we seized upon Rand Paul. Ron was too old and too irascible. Let's just put it that way. So we started our pilgrimage to doing that. And then 2016 didn't turn out the way we thought it would. And again, the gambler in me, I always bet the winner. Don't bet your gut. So I would have loved to see Rand Paul, become president. But I actually bet that Trump was going to win because I saw him at FreedomFest and he was a force, still is a force, has all foibles and all. I mean, again, there's a lot of things we could go in there. But anyway, so now we're looking at 2024. So it's time to dust it off. And It's a Paul World is back up and running and talking to people like yourself.
Oh, my goodness gracious. Okay, I'm on board.
Yeah.
Well, not that means much, but that's fine.
And the thing that we like about it is that Rand Paul has stuck to his principles, and when he disagreed with Donald Trump, he didn't vote with him, and when he agreed with him, he voted with him. And he's been fighting this mask ban. In fact, he is now talking about introducing in the Senate a piece of legislation to let us remove the masks when we fly on airplanes. Imagine that, Americans getting to choose whether or not they should wear a mask.
What can I say other than how can I? By the way, if you wandering around Montana, it's not terribly common to see a mask.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, well, and again, I live in California, and I can tell you that when they shut this state down, and they kept it shut down, and all of that, I mean, it was just crazy. And then when when Pfizer and Moderna were both approved, the state of California built and you'll probably hopefully this reference will work. But if you remember Rube Goldberg and all
Yes.
those, yeah. So that they used Rube, the son or grandson of Rube Goldberg, to design how they would dispense the vaccine. So when they sit there and complain they can't get enough people, I'm like, it's a labyrinth in a Byzantine world. It is just insane.
So can't people just go here? Anyone can go in there, any number in the grocery store. You can go and get a free vaccination. I mean, I don't know.
Can't. Well, you can now, but understand that so my wife has a heart condition, so she should have been early on the list, and we signed up. California, sign up, and we'll contact you. She's on 3 lists. I'm on 2 lists. They never contacted us, but I, of course, had to go in and figure out how to game the CVS system, because CVS was one of the first pharmacies, and I got her an early appointment. And when we went back for her second appointment, I asked the guy, because of course, they're 30 days apart. So that means everybody who was with us the first day should have been there the next time, and they were not there. And I said to the guy, well, there's no line, so you must have additional material. Can I get my first shot? And he said, no, under California law, it's illegal for us to administer a shot to you because you aren't the right box, bracket, all of that stuff. So here's what I did. I mean, you're a guy who likes stories. I don't wait around for the government to let me do stuff. So I basically signed up in Arizona, and I drove 610 miles in a day there and back and got a shot, and did it twice. And people say, John, that's nuts. And I said, no, that's me taking responsibility. I don't need, sadly, my mother is long gone. I feel I'm weaned. I don't need to have the government tell me when I can and cannot do it. By the way, in California, they excluded doctors. Apparently they did that around most of the country. So our doctor didn't know how to do it. My wife's cardiologist couldn't tell her how to go get her a shot, even though he told us if she gets it, she could die. She seriously can die. But the cardiologist had no way to fast track her into getting a shot. Insanity is what that's called, in my opinion. So I feel like I've been on the John Baden couch here, going through this. I mean, I called to interview you, and anyway, but
well,
hopefully you've enjoyed our conversation. I've enjoyed talking to you.
You're welcome to ask some questions about ranching and wildlife if you want. I'm happy to talk about any of that at greater length than you're or irrigation. Any number of things I'm happy to talk about that I know a little bit about. Or anthropology, I can tell you about a lot about anthropology.
So whatever happened to the Hootville? Hooterites. Are they still around?
Actually, yes, that was the fastest growing population in the history of the world when I was working with them.
Okay.
They had the mean completed number of children per family was 10.4 children.
Oh, wow.
They had third world breeding patterns and first world medicine. And so their infant mortality was the same as other white Americans or Canadians. And they, with that number of children, they had a doubling time of, when I was with them, 16.4 years.
Wow.
Now, yeah, it's a world record. And now I haven't been on a colony for a long time. It's not much fun. I
can imagine.
Once you've done it a few times. I mean, I was at many colonies. But it was the last time we were in a colony was, I don't know, probably 2 years ago. And you go into this colony, and all the buildings, which are small apartments, like 2 to 4 in a group, like and all the machinery is totally modern. They're not like Amish.
Okay.
They have the most modern equipment there is. But you see these kids run out to see the strangers you've driven in, and they look like they're in the 15th century or 16th century.
Wow.
They're dressed, the girls are dressed these long dresses and bonnets, and it's really neat. You wouldn't want to live there, but it's really interesting. And I'm thinking now it would be just over 50 years since I actually lived with them. It'd be sort of interesting to go back.
Right.
But I haven't done it though. So other than just a drive through, which is different.
Cursory.
But they were, when I was with them, they had a total of 20,000 people. And something in excess between 100 and 120, 150 different colonies. The colonies are smaller now, smaller in numbers,
Right.
but there are a lot more of them. And I don't know what the attrition rate is. I just don't have any idea. Meaning people who leave the colony to join the world, as they call it.
Right. Right. Kind of say this is it, and I'm going to go out there.
Yeah.
Well, all I can say, John Baden, is I look forward to meeting you in beautiful Rapid City, South Dakota. And by the way, anybody who doesn't already have your ticket, go get your ticket, because it's coming up on July 21st to the 24th. And I will actually give you directions, because you do not need to go to Google Maps. So this is my shameless plug. And I'm going to ask John to give his shameless plug for it. Here's what you do. You find Interstate 90. Now, if you cannot find or understand the interstate highway system, go back to your 4th grade teacher, get a refund. Find Interstate 90. Determine if you are east or west of Rapid City. If you are east, head west. If you are west, head east. It is the wide spot in South Dakota. And I know I have people who live in Rapid City. They probably will go, but hey, there's 78,000 people in Rapid City. So you should be able to find it, and you have no excuse. And you can drive there, you can get there, you can fly there, and it's going to be a lot of fun. John, any last words as to why somebody should go to FreedomFest, other than, of course, to see your charming self? Is your wife coming with you? Or are you going?
My wife is indeed coming with me. Well, I mean, something could happen, but
well, I mean, she's got to watch out, because you could be a party animal for all we know. I mean, look at you. You start doing this ag talking and commune. Who knows where it leads, huh?
Well, we look forward to going. We love to travel together. Great.
All right. Well, I just want to thank John Baden. And if you have not seen his beautiful ranch, he's got a wonderful website. All I can say is he's telling you right now, Montana is closed. There is no land available. So forget about it. Just look and enjoy, travel through, but don't stay, right?
Well, I would say, by the way, we are just north. You've all heard of Yellowstone Park. And just north of Yellowstone Park is Big Sky, which you've probably heard of, the big ski area. And we are just north of Big Sky, 27 miles, and on just an attractive ranch. And if people want to stop by, people who listen to your program, if they want to stop by, we're really easy to find.
There you go. All right. Well, this is John Paul Mendoza with It's a Paul World. My special guest has been John Baden. He's been very gracious, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. And what you should do is, when you see him in Rapid City, say hello. And I, like everyone who goes to FreedomFest, you will get a lot of interesting ideas and conversation, as you can tell. Thank you, John.
Thanks so much, John. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.